So how many of you consider yourselves to be, creative people? There's a fair number of you. Okay, how many of you consider yourselves not to be all that creative? Let's do the opposite here. Yeah, right there with you. But today I'm going to challenge you. Those of you who don't think of yourselves as very creative, because I think you are, you just don't know it. I think that creativity gets stomped out of us at some point for a lot of people. Some people hold on to it really well. By the time we reach adulthood, we may no longer consider ourselves very creative if we ever did, and we don't make creativity a priority. If you're like me, we look at envy at people like, say, music directors, and think that their life is so much more creative than all of us. We have those society pressures that tell us to conform and to stifle those God-given talents. I do think that creativity is, in a sense, God-given, or something that at least we're born with, an ability to be creative. I think it started with that Big Bang. You think back to when you were a child, right? You didn't have to think about how to play, you just did it, right? Or finding things to be creative. You could find creativity with pipe cleaners, just about anything, a stick, the mud. Well, this call to be creative, this sense of creativity that I think belongs in all of us, the Catholics have a great word for it. They have 3 different types of love that they talk about. One is called agape love, which is a universal kind of love. The third is philia, or a friendship kind of love. And the third is called eros, or erotic love. And eros is only partially really about sexuality, but it's about the desire to create, whether that's to have sex, make pottery, raise a child, write a dissertation, build a nation, create justice. It all comes from this place of eros, which is a kind of love. Each vacation I get a little antsy. I get a few days off and I start cleaning and organizing. That's what I've been doing the last week. It's been great. My house has never looked so good. I've learned that organizing, by the way, is a form of adult play. Am I right? Right? When you kind of organize things, you may not get a whole lot done, but you're organized. I used to feel very overwhelmed by the thought of picking up actually even just a pen or a paintbrush, because I wasn't one of those creative types. I never grew up thinking that way. And I think that too often we consider other people, right? Those creative types. Those are others. Those great and famous artists, people who exhibit extraordinary talent, people like Pete Seeger, a singer, or Louisa May Alcott, the writer, or Frank Lloyd Wright, right, the architect. I think, well, those are those famous people over there, extraordinary. Except for that each one of them was also a Unitarian Universalist. We are all creative. We all have that ability to be our own creative geniuses, whether it's in art, writing, music, dance, crafts, work, building a home, building a life. Because creativity isn't limited to the arts. It extends to how we do everything in our life. Our jobs, our family life, romance, church, justice. Anything really where we are building something, whether it's something new or changing what is old. Creativity comes in all aspects of our lives. And I believe that creativity is also absolutely vital in this world. Because we've got these problems out there, and one of my favorite people, Albert Einstein, he said this: "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." Right? I mean, it seems so simple and obvious, but it's so true. And this really applies to anything. What isn't working in your life? What isn't working in your life? If something isn't working, then it's time to get creative. Here's the other thing that Einstein said: insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Because I think sometimes we do that in our lives, right? If I just work harder, that'll bring me more happiness, or that'll somehow bring me more money, and that'll bring me more happiness. If I just work harder, or maybe if I just ignore that situation, if I just distract myself more with whatever addiction I have, Time to get creative. So how does one then become creative? If you don't think of yourself as a creative person, what does it take to be creative? Well, first of all, it takes inspiration. Now, inspiration is not a brilliant idea per se, but rather a new way of seeing things. It's acknowledging, okay, this isn't working anymore. I've got to do something different. That meditation that we just did is an example of inspiration. You ask yourself a question. Okay, what do I want to bring into my life? Maybe you hadn't asked yourself that this year or ever. That's a new way, a new question to ask yourself. It's a cultivated way of going inward and allowing things to kind of come up. It's something that you find in yourself, and it takes time to learn, and inspiration is cultivated. It's something that is learned. The word itself actually comes from Latin, right? In spiritus, to be inspirited, but the word spiritus actually is the word for breath, to breathe in. You know, in Genesis, right, when it says God created the world, he did this, a breath of wind. Let there be light. That's the idea. That's why it's been associated with the Holy Spirit, this idea of we just breathe. If you want inspiration, just simply breathe. Listen to your breath go inward. And here's the real secret to creativity that most people will not tell you. The creative types out there, it's not that this is really a secret. Maybe they haven't actually thought about it that much. But to them, it's second nature. But Steve Jobs actually sort of blew the lid on it. He said, creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they really didn't do it. They just saw something, a connection. It seemed obvious to them after a while. That's because they were able to connect experiences they've had and synthesize new things. Creativity is just connecting things. So inspiration is about listening and connection. And maybe like today in your meditation, you made a connection with something you want to bring into your life, and that symbol, that's making a connection. It's as simple as that. That is creativity. But is that really all there is to creativity? You just have to be inspired, inspiration, right? If all I do is I just think of it and then it'll happen. There's an entire theology out there right now, abundance theology. If I just sort of, the laws of attraction, right? If I just think it, it'll happen to me. I'm not a big fan of The Secret and abundance theology. I do believe in the laws of attraction. I think that if you put it out there in the world that you want something, chances are you're going to start encountering it. But it does take more than just pure imagination. I mean, Willy Wonka had a lot of Oompa Loompas to help him create his world of imagination, right? So I believe in laws of attraction, but not magic. To illustrate this as a joke, I think I've actually told you this one before, but it's my favorite joke, so I'm going to go ahead and tell it to you anyways. It's about a devout man who goes and prays to church every single week. One day he comes to the church and he prays to God, please God, I'm going to lose my job. Can you let me win the lottery? I don't want to lose my job. Please let me win the lottery. Well, the next week he comes back and he prays again, and God, I lost my job and I didn't win the lottery. Now my wife and kids are going to leave me. Please let me win the lottery. The next week comes. Now he's angry. God, why did you do this to me? Why didn't you let me win the lottery? I've lost everything now. And suddenly there's an answer back, and he says, for heaven's sake, please buy a lottery ticket. Because there's so much praying that you can do to put it out there in the world, but you actually have to work hard at it. Thomas Edison said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Probably heard that before. And genius is just another way of saying a highly creative person. But you know, we Americans, right, we want immediate. We just want to do that 1%. We don't really want to do that 99%. We want that instant gratification. Feel a little bit like that camel. Humph. I don't want to have to work hard. So creativity, it takes inspiration and it takes hard work. The idea that creativity takes hard work This was pivotal to a best-selling author, Anne Lamott. You know Anne Lamott? She wrote this wonderful book called Bird by Bird. And it's based on this story that she wrote. She said this: 30 years ago, my older brother, who was 10 years old at the time, was trying to get a report on birds written that he'd had 3 months to write. I'm sure you parents can understand this. It was due the next day. We were out at our family cabin in Bolinas, and he was at the kitchen table close to tears, surrounded by binder paper and pencils and unopened books on birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. Then my father sat down next to him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird." When I get overwhelmed at the thought of trying to come up with something new, creative to do, it can be very overwhelming. Maybe you're overwhelmed with the enormity of what you want to bring into your life. And all I can say is, take it bird by bird. So with that in mind, just take a moment. Think about that thing that you want to bring into your life. What's one thing that you could do today? One small, tiny thing that you could do today that will help you toward that. And then what is something that you could do next week? Just one tiny thing. Because that's how you do it, right? Bird by bird. I have to tell you, I can stand up here and talk about that all the time, all I want to, but it's really hard for me to get that, because I don't want it to be hard. I mean, all those masters out there, they make it look so easy. And I want to be a master before I am an apprentice. Like that camel, I just want to say, "Humph!" I don't want to work that hard. But you know, that leads us to the last ingredient, I think, for creativity. Yo-Yo Ma, that wonderful cellist, he said, "Passion is one great force that unleashes creativity. Because if you're passionate about something, then you're willing to take risks." Passion will motivate you to take risks, and courage will help you to take them again and again when you don't get it right. So here's your ingredients. The other problem is that you are going to make mistakes, right? Because you're going to take those risks. You've got that passion behind you. Don't worry. There are many different ways of making mistakes. Twyla Tharp, that wonderful dancer and choreographer, ultimately there's no such thing as failure. There are lessons learned in different ways. I like Thomas Edison when he talked about inventing the light bulb. He said, "I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work." So again, I want you to take a moment to think about that thing again that you want to bring into your life, and what is it that gives you passion and drive behind it? Why is it that you want it? What's the motivation? And then what risks are you willing to take? So creativity, in a sense, it begins in inspiration and asking a question to see the world differently. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's going to take your passion, and it's going to take your courage to do it, because it's going to stretch you beyond what you know about yourself. And we need to be creative because we aren't going to solve the world's problems with the same old thinking. We aren't going to solve the problems of this church with the same old thinking. and you'll never grow or change with the same old thinking. So today, I've quoted a lot of very famous people up here, from writers and musicians to inventors and scientists and dancers. These are all masters of creativity. But here's a quote from someone who is not so famous, who stumbles all the time and makes mistakes, just as any apprentice would. You can do it! You rock! May it be so.
Please stand as you're comfortable. We're going to sing number 298, Wake Now My Senses.